Hi, it's Pearl here, and what a blessing today. I have got the most gorgeous day. If you're watching this, you can see I'm sitting on the beach and the sea is right there. That's the sound you can hear, the ocean. And the sun has come out, and I've just taught my Zumba class. And one of the ladies said, you know what, the weather's about to change and it's going to get horrible. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to run out and soak up as much sunshine as I can. Because I've learned this year that I've known a little bit, but I've learned a lot more this year about how important that strong light is for us to have a good level of serotonin in our bodies. And serotonin is something I started looking into more deeply this year. So it's not in my Guide to Healing book, but there's a little bit in my exercise book that's just come out, and there's going to be a new book coming out quite soon looking at all the happy chemicals, so serotonin, dopamine, endorphins and oxytocin. But serotonin is the one that once you start looking into it, it's crazy, man. It's crazy, and it's crazy how much we don't know about it. But we believe now that actually our skin can create serotonin just from light. So it's not the UV, it's not the ultraviolet, but it's the strong light. And I don't know about you, but as soon as I get outside into this beautiful light, I start to feel better. I feel more positive. And a lot of people will know that serotonin is one of those things in the body. It's a neurotransmitter, and also sometimes classed as an enzyme, I think. And we think about it very often in relation to depression because of the antidepressants, the class of antidepressants called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And what they do is, in a really cheap and easy way of describing it, is they kind of stop your brain from recycling the serotonin. So it kind of keeps the serotonin in the brain. But it doesn't work very well if you don't have a lot of serotonin in the first place, because it's a reuptake inhibitor. It's not a serotonin creator. And the reason I started looking into it was because I was looking at some drugs that my GP wanted me to take, which are called triptans. And they work for people who have migraine, and they work by boosting serotonin receptors primarily. And when I looked at that, I thought, well, hang on, why do I need my serotonin receptors boosted? Which is a really good question. I think questions that we should ask about any kind of medication. So when I looked at it and I thought, I realized that serotonin is responsible for so many different things in our bodies. So we think about it in relation to our mood and depression. But actually, serotonin is responsible for so many different things in our bodies, right? So even to bone health, right? And one of the things about bone health is that we have actually got different types of serotonin, and they work differently. And so some of them might be positive for bone health, and some of them might be negative for bone health. I mean, it's really complex. And when you look into it, you realize as well how little we know, how much more we need to study and understand. So this thing about the light is fantastic, because we're learning that our skin can create serotonin. And a lot of the studies even say we can do that without tryptophan, which is what normally we have to eat in order to be able to produce serotonin in our brains and in our gut. So there's 3 places we produce serotonin in the body, and that is in the gut, which is about 95% of the serotonin, in the brain, and in our skin. But of course, when I say 95%, that's what we thought before. So it could actually be different to that. So serotonin is also really important for our blood clotting as well. And it's really important for our heart health, because it works to both open and close our blood vessels. So if you suffer from migraine, you might know that one of the things that happens in migraine is that our blood vessels in the brain get wider. And the serotonin, usually a good level of serotonin, works to reduce those blood vessels again. So we need that serotonin in the brain to help us to do that. And serotonin is also really important in women's health, because of that opening and closing of the blood vessels, relates to when we have periods. But it's also, serotonin is also boosted, and the receptors are boosted by estrogen. So when we start to lose estrogen in perimenopause, or even during a cycle, that drop in serotonin can also cause a lot of problems in our bodies, because the estrogen goes and the serotonin goes. And one of the things about this is that we can be tested. So we can be tested and have quite normal levels of estrogen, and quite normal levels of serotonin. But what happens is when the estrogen drops, even though it's not falling to like what you might call a disastrous level, the serotonin drops so far, we get what we call a serotonin deficiency. And that can cause all kinds of problems, including depression, really crazy thoughts. Sometimes we feel like we're going crazy, and that's related to a condition that you might have heard of called PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. See, look, I don't have a script. This is good that I'm remembering this. So for a lot of people who suffer from PMDD, it might be really useful to look into serotonin and what's happening in our bodies and why we're having a serotonin deficiency. Now, there are some people who recommend that you supplement, okay? So supplement with things like more tryptophan, and also certain other chemicals as well. But these and SSRIs can cause a thing called serotonin syndrome. So naturally in the body, it's really, really rare for us to have too much serotonin. It's so rare that it would cause us, I would say, physiological problems, okay? And it's funny, I was talking about this the other day, and a lady said, you know what, I had it, because she was prescribed an antidepressant that she reacted to, and she actually suffered from serotonin syndrome, which is really dangerous. Having said that, it's not that rare for us to have problems when our serotonin goes up suddenly, okay? So you might be aware, so seasonal affective disorder is something that happens during the winter in England and countries where we don't have a lot of light. And we actually, so in England, the NHS actually uses what we call light boxes to give to people who've got SAD or seasonal affective disorder, so that they can have that strong light throughout the year, and that their mood doesn't go so low and they don't get really depressed. But when you look at the studies on light, one of the really interesting things is we talk about people becoming very low and depressed through the winter. But actually the peak of when we have, I say low mood, or what I want to talk about is when people are so affected by this that they actually become suicidal. And that actually peaks in around about May here in the UK. So when the sunlight comes back up and it gets quite strong. We've got a plane here as well. Don't know if you can see it. Yeah, it's right above me. I think that might be, it's a small plane, not a Spitfire. We often get a lot of Spitfires down here, which is kind of fun. Sitting on the beach, you just don't know what you're going to get. So serotonin is a very complicated thing, and what I found absolutely fascinating, and I think we should all be talking about, is when I looked deeper into it and I looked at the gut, so many doctors are calling for us to understand this more, because actually it's often gut problems and problems with our gut microbiome that are causing us to have really low levels of serotonin, and a lot of psychological problems as well as physiological problems. So problems with our blood vessels. I'm trying to think of all the many things. Things like insulin sensitivity is also supported by serotonin. So it's crazy when you think about all the many things that serotonin has anything to do with. It really does feel, when you look at a list, it's just about everything in the body, okay? But one of the things we're not talking about, and we should be talking about, is what COVID did to the gut microbiome. And when I started to looking into this year, I was so shocked at all of the letters, the articles, and the scientific studies that have been done showing that when people had COVID and also after COVID, the gut microbiome was so affected because COVID killed off all of the bacteria called short chain fatty acid producing bacteria. So all of these bacteria in the gut, what they do is they regulate our serotonin, they regulate our dopamine, they regulate lots of other neurotransmitters as well. And also what they do is they are responsible for the barriers in our body. So our gut blood barrier, our lung blood barrier, and our blood-brain barrier. So all of these things that make sure that things in our body stay in the right places. So we don't get a leaky gut, we don't get a leaky brain, and we don't get leaky lungs, if you can call them that. And it's very interesting for me, suffering from migraine, when I looked into this and I realized how much worse my migraines became after I had COVID. And when we have a kind of a weak blood-brain barrier, obviously things can get into the brain that are not meant to be there. And those things can trigger all kinds of problems, including migraine. And I find it absolutely fascinating when I read a lot of studies about how many different psychological problems people who had COVID had when they were in hospital. So disorders and things that were like the disorders of dementia, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, obviously migraine, headache, pain, a lot of chronic pain. So it's really important when we start to understand this impact of COVID on the gut, that we can start to understand, hey, our serotonin cannot be where it needs to be because we've still got a problem in the gut and we've got a lack of those short chain fatty acid producing bacteria. So one of the things I read, and it was very interesting, was that sometimes it's the prebiotics that are really healing. And one of the things I thought was really funny was it's protein starch resistant starch from potatoes. So resistant starch from potatoes is really, really good to help the gut microbiome heal. And you can get that from oven chips. And I actually ate a ton of oven chips after I had COVID because I was so ill. And I was really struggling to cook properly and to eat properly. And it was one thing I found I could eat chips. So I actually thought, hey, maybe I was actually doing something good for myself. I wouldn't recommend eating that many chips. I would recommend a thing called moringa leaf, which is something I take now, and it's like a powder you can get. And it's a really great prebiotic. And what a prebiotic is when you take it, when you eat it, put it with your other food, it helps. It's like a food for the short chain fatty acid bacteria. So what it means is that you've got a wonderful food for any of those bacteria in your gut. A probiotic is when you're actually supplementing with those bacteria. Now, the reason I don't do probiotics really is that when I looked into it and I looked into scientific studies, generally all probiotics will help people with migraine, but there are a few that can make it worse. And so that made me a little bit hesitant because I thought, you know what, prebiotics and also just generally changing my diet so that I'm really feeding my gut bacteria really well and taking care of them. It's probably in the long run, it's about changing that lifestyle to make sure that I'm constantly taking care of those bacteria and making sure that my gut microbiome stays healthy. So that's, it's we don't really necessarily hear about why it's so important to take care of the gut microbiome. I say it right, the gut microbiome, when it comes to dealing with our mental health. But if you look, and if you just listening to this podcast, you can then go away and Google it and read from the many, many doctors who are writing about this and saying, you know what, we need to change our approach. We don't need to be giving people antidepressants. We need to be educating people about the gut microbiome if we want people to have good mental health. Because it's not disconnected, it's all connected. And it's really about changing that approach and looking holistically and understanding all the different things that contribute to us having good levels of neurotransmitters in the brain. So with serotonin, just to finish off, tryptophan is the building block of serotonin. And you can get that it's a protein, you get it in all kinds of food. If you're vegan, soy protein has it, it's great. Chickpeas are fantastic. I eat a lot of chickpea flour now, and I think that's helping me. And we think we need about 5 sessions of exercise a week of about 30 minutes to get us going, and because the exercise actually helps us to produce and maintain good levels of serotonin, we think, at the moment. So those are the things to look at if you feel that you have a low mood. Now, of course, there are other neurotransmitters, and I'm going to talk more about dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins as well. But one thing I have developed, and it's in my books, my new books, is my new exercise book. If you want to check it out, it's got a happy chemical menu, which show you very quickly the things that you can do to boost your serotonin and other happy chemicals. But just really easily, are you getting enough light? Are you getting enough tryptophan? Are you getting enough protein in your diet? What's your gut microbiome like? Is it healthy, or do you need to supplement with like a prebiotic or a probiotic? Honestly, if you need to improve your gut microbiome, you've got about 1 million articles and books, and every health food shop would help you with that. Are you getting enough exercise? It's important that we're getting enough exercise. But the killer for me, and I think a lot of people, especially when you're going through perimenopause, is sleep. And it's one of those horrible, like, vicious cycles in that serotonin and dopamine, well, we need good sleep to have good levels of them, and we need them to have good levels of sleep. So all we can do is keep trying with that. And I think one of the best things they say is, getting this level of light, getting the exercise, eating healthily, can all help us to sleep better, which then can help us with our serotonin levels. But it is hard. It's hard sometimes with migraine, there's been a lot of times where I haven't been able to eat because I've been so sick. And so sitting there, talking about the gut microbiome, it would be kind of useless to me because I'd be like, well, all I'm managing is, I'd be lucky some days if I can manage a piece of toast. So, or a dry cracker or something. So it's really important that when we look at these things, that we also have so much compassion, because it's really easy for influencers and people like me or doctors to say, oh, do this. But actually, very often we need to build it up slowly. And with serotonin, we need to build it up slowly. So if you do get a chance to go out in the sunlight, be careful with that, build it up slowly. And also, we can only build it up slowly when it comes sometimes to improving things like sleep or diet, or even exercise as well. And that's why I write a lot of books about, how do we do these things? Because it's so easy to say it, isn't it? It's much easier to say it than to do it, especially when you think that another aspect of serotonin is that we're told to reduce stress levels. So obviously, if we've got low levels of serotonin, it can be hard to manage our mental health. And if we're depressed, it can be very hard to reduce our stress levels. So meditation and mindfulness is really important and really useful, but sometimes we don't want to be focusing on that when really we want to be doing practical things, like just making sure we're eating properly, or trying to get some sleep, or even trying to get some exercise, or some beautiful sunshine. So take care. I hope that helps, and don't be afraid to drop any questions in the YouTube comments, and just let me know if you find this useful. Okay, you take care. See you soon. Bye.